You are standing in your kitchen at 11:47 p.m., eating leftovers cold out of the container, because you forgot to eat again. Not because you were busy doing something for yourself, because you were busy doing something for everyone else. Again, your phone has 14 unread messages. You saw them all. You haven't answered any of them. Not because you don't care, you care about everything almost too much, but because you're so depleted that even forming a response feels like lifting something you can no longer pick up. Tomorrow you have to be somewhere at 8 a.m. You haven't slept before midnight in 3 weeks. Your to-do list has to-do lists, and somewhere under all of it, there is a version of you that is tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You close the container, put it back in the fridge, tell yourself you'll do better tomorrow, and then you open your phone and start answering the messages. If that landed somewhere in your chest, stay with me, because this video is about you. You grew up being told you were capable, and you are. But somewhere along the way, capable became a cage. You are the one who figured it out, who made it work, who showed up when things fell apart. Not because someone asked you to, but because you looked around and saw that no one else was going to. You learned to optimize. You learned to research the best decision before making it, and then second-guess it anyway. You learned to carry your phone everywhere because if something happens, you need to know. You learned to have a backup plan and a backup plan for the backup plan. And the exhausting part, the part no one talks about, is that you are good at this. You have built a life that works. From the outside, you look like someone who has it together. A job, a routine, maybe a few plants you've kept alive, a group chat where you're the one who actually coordinates. But inside, there is this constant hum, a low-level alert that never fully switches off, a sense that you should be doing more, working more, growing more, becoming more. That resting is falling behind. That stopping is the same as giving up. You scroll through your own life sometimes, your photos, your messages, and you think, I have built something real. Why do I still feel like it's not enough? That is not a personal failing. That is a psychological signature, and it has a name. If you have ever had that thought, why is this not enough? Drop a 1 in the comments. You'd be surprised how many women are reading this right now thinking the same thing. Here is what makes the millennial woman's psychology unlike any generation before her. She was handed impossible instructions, and she followed them almost perfectly, and still arrived at a place no one warned her about. What you are living with has a name in psychology. Researchers call it chronic self-monitoring combined with status incongruence. Dr. Jean Twenge, who has studied generational psychological differences for over 2 decades, documented this clearly. Millennial women were raised inside a cultural paradox, told they could have everything, told they should want everything, told that ambition was feminism, and then given no actual support structure for the cost of that ambition. You were raised watching your mother's generation fight for a seat at the table, and then you got to the table and found out it wasn't designed for you either. The hours, the expectations, the emotional labor still defaulted to you, and you assumed the problem was you. This is what psychologists call role overload, a documented state where demands structurally exceed any individual's capacity to meet them without chronic stress. It is not a mindset problem, it is a math problem. But your nervous system doesn't know that. Your nervous system learned to respond to that overload with hyper-vigilance, a constant background scan for what else might go wrong, who else might need something, what you might be forgetting. You didn't develop anxiety. You developed a response to an anxious environment. There is a difference, and understanding that difference changes everything. Think back to when you were young, not when you were little. when you were somewhere between girl and woman, around 11 or 12 or 13. You were watching. You were always watching. You watched how the adults around you moved through their responsibilities. You watched who was tired and who wasn't. You watched who got to rest and who kept going. And whether you knew it consciously or not, you were learning the rules. Maybe you were in a household where a lot rested on very few shoulders. Maybe your mother worked 2 things and still made dinner. Maybe you were the older sibling who quietly absorbed tasks no one assigned you. Maybe you grew up during a time of financial instability. 2008 hit when many of you were teenagers. You watched security disappear for people who had done everything right, and you decided the safest thing you could do was work harder, be more prepared, never stop. Or maybe it was subtler. Maybe you were praised for your capability in a way that taught you your value was conditional on your output, that the love and approval you got from the world had a performance requirement attached, and so you became someone who performs, not for attention, for safety, for the feeling of being enough. Over time, that stopped being a choice. It became the water you swam in. You stopped noticing you were exhausted because you stopped noticing you had another option. But here's the part I want to be honest with you about. The hyper-vigilance that kept you safe, it has a cost. Not a character flaw, a cost. It keeps you in a permanent state of low-level bracing. It makes intimacy harder because being truly seen means being seen stopping, being seen resting. It keeps you in relationships with people, jobs, versions of yourself, past the point they are serving you, because leaving means you failed. It makes joy hard to fully land because part of you is always scanning for what comes next. You are not broken, but you are running a program that was written for a harder time. And it is still running, even when the emergency is over. What you built, this competence, this resilience, this ability to carry more than most people will ever be asked to carry, is not a flaw. It is extraordinary. The work now is not to dismantle what you built. The work is to let yourself know that the emergency has passed. That rest is not a reward for finishing. It is a requirement for continuing. That being still does not mean falling behind. What you called exhaustion is actually proof of how hard you have loved, how much you have carried, and how little you have asked for in return. Drop an 8 in the comments if this is the first time someone has named this for you. When was the first time you remember believing that stopping was dangerous? Not being lazy, dangerous. The age you learned that moving, producing, performing was how you stayed okay. You don't have to write a paragraph, even just the age, even just a single word for what that felt like. Leave it in the comments. I'll be there. If this stayed with you, our next video goes even deeper. The psychology of Gen Z women and how the generation that came after you is carrying its own impossible brief in an entirely different direction. Watch it next.